How's it going, everybody? My name's Dave Whipple and you're watching Cheap Wheels. If you live somewhere where they salt the roads in the winter, the spring hangers on your truck might look something like this. What a spring hanger does in your truck is connects the leaf spring to the frame. This is what a good spring hanger looks like. This is what a bad spring hanger looks like. What we're going to do today is we're going to take the rusty, nasty spring hanger out of this old F-250. We're going to put in a brand new one. Let me show you guys how easy it is to do and how important it is to do. Because on an old truck like this, if you don't have leaf springs, you don't have a truck. This job is quite simple and it's quite straightforward. The hardest part of this job is getting the nut off the one giant bolt that passes through the center of the spring. Once you get that bolt off, the second hardest job is to pull the bolt out. A lot of times they're frozen in to the little collar that's inside the spring itself. The biggest worry in this job is stripping this bolt or stripping this nut, because you have to put so much force on a great big hard steel bolt like this. If it is damaged and you can't get a real good grip on it, there's really no way to, you'd have to pretty much cut it off.
Now on this particular vehicle, the nut on the back side of that bolt is a 24mm nut. I actually used a 15/16 wrench because it's about the same size, only just a fraction smaller. What you want is you want the tightest fit that you can possibly get on whatever size nut that you have. You can't run the risk of stripping that nut out.
Now that we've got that nut off the spring hanger bolt, we are just going to leave our bolt in place. We don't want to touch that. Now we're going to start drilling out our rivets. Then we're going to have to jack up the back of the truck to get the weight off that leaf spring.
Time to start the drilling process. What we want to do is we want to take a nice sharp hard steel center punch and we're going to put a divot in the center of the rivet. Kind of figure on which way you're going to attack that rivet with the drill and figure where you need to put that divot so that once the drill bit gets into the rivet, you're going to be at the center of the rivet. Put your divot in and then start with an 1/8" drill bit. What we're going to do is we're going to work our way up from an 1/8 to 3/16 to a 1/4 to maybe 3/8 and then up to a 1/2 inch. We want to start small and work incrementally, and it'll make drilling seem effortless. That's a little bit of an awkward angle to get in there up underneath your truck, but it's a very easy job. One pitfall you can fall into if you start with a large bit and you're trying to get a lot done quick, if it's not a sharp bit, it's going to feel impossible. Start with small drill bits and work incrementally, and drilling these rivets will be no problem. What you want to do on that first hole is you want to pass it all the way through the head of that rivet and then into the stem of the rivet where it's actually passing through the frame. Get that first hole deep, and then the next hole will be easy to get deep too. If you're shallow with the first hole, well, the next hole that you drill is going to be a little tougher. So make sure you're a long ways in there with your 1/8" bit. I think the very minimum you'd want to use is an 1/8, a 1/4, 3/8, and a 1/2. You might want to throw in a couple extra sizes of drill bits if your drill bits are really dull, but if you've got good fresh bits, that's what I would go with, about 4 drill bits. It might seem like you're going to save time by just using a couple larger bits, but I haven't had that experience. I found that the incremental drilling really makes this process easy. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a couple large hardwood blocks, and I'm going to put my floor jack on top of the blocks, and I'm going to jack the body of the truck up from the underside of the reese hitch. Now this is going to take the tension off that spring and allow me to take that spring hanger off without lifting up the body of the truck. The tension on the spring will slam into the bottom of the box as soon as that spring hanger is free, and the body will drop down. And in just a short amount of time of drilling, we're pretty much through these rivets.
The next drill bit we use is going to be a 1/2" bit, and that is going to, once it gets through the rivet itself, it's actually going to turn loose the edge of the rivet because the center of that rivet's about a 1/2 inch. So on this next bit, we're going to take all these rivets off. I'm all the way through that rivet and it hasn't come off, so I'm going to bump it with a cold chisel. And there's that rivet. If you're always drilling right towards the center of the rivet. And generally the rivet portion will just pop off. But if you're a little bit off center, just bump it with a cold chisel a couple times. It'll pop right off there. You can see this one was drilled more accurately towards the center, and once I got through, this one just popped right off. I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull out this one right down here in the corner, drill it out to 1/2 inch, pop the rivet off it, and I'm going to stick a bolt through that particular hole just to hold this thing in place while I take off the rest of the rivets. All that's for is just to hold that thing from flying around once I knock the rest of these off.
Now I'm using a long piece of threaded rod, and I've kind of ground the end to a little bit of a taper just to kind of get back in there like a long punch and knock those rivets through the holes in the frame.
Now look at that. That's the thing of beauty. That's a job that's nearly done. There's that big bolt. Honestly, the drilling part's kind of fun. I don't mind the drilling part at all. Getting the nut off, getting the bolt to come loose, that's the hard part. Here's the new shackle. Here's the old one. This one probably weighs twice what this one weighs. Now that we have that bolt out, let's clean the threads up a bit before we put it back in. I'm putting a little bit of grease on this sucker just because it's so difficult to thread together, and that ought to do it. Now I'm pretty sure that this nut is actually a crushed nut, so it's going to get tight, it's going to stay tight, but I don't really need to just kill myself getting it back together. Well, I'm glad we're to this point, that's for sure.
Once you put that big heavy spring bolt back through the spring, put your bolts in that come with your spring hanger, and you're done.
Now this job takes some muscle to bust loose that great big nut on that great big hard steel bolt. But once you've got that done, and you've got that bolt out of the collar inside the bushing, you're pretty much done. Drill the rivets out, put bolts in where the rivets were on the new spring hanger, and you're back in business. It also requires heavy duty tools. You're not going to do this with a 3/8 drive ratchet, and you're not going to do this with just a wrench. You're going to need cheater bars, you're going to need breaker bars, 1/2 inch drive sockets, maybe an impact if you can get it in there. No matter what you use to get a spring hanger like this off, make sure you get a spring hanger like this off. Because if you're driving a truck, you're driving it to haul things, you're driving it to carry a load. And you don't want to do either one of those with one of these. Thank you guys so much for watching Cheap Wheels. My name is Dave Whipple. Keep your junk on the road. See you soon.